Hello, everyone. Russell Goodman, Supply Chain Brain, Senior Editor here, welcoming you to today's information-packed program. We call it Striking Gold, how to meet employee expectations and exceed productivity goals. So tell me, post-COVID, have you heard about better work-life balance? Well, you bet you have. Employee expectations have changed. And now, more than ever, employees across the supply chain expect flexibility, stability, and a better work-life balance. But at the same time, leaders in supply chain are asked to do more with less. So where's the balance? How can leaders in today's environment meet both employee and productivity expectations? Well, today, our experts will discuss strategies for navigating this new environment, this new normal, if you will. They'll tell you how to identify areas of opportunity within your workforce and how to respond to changing employee expectations. You're going to learn creative and cost-effective solutions to drive productivity and how to utilize new tech stacks to improve your operational efficiency. Well, I, for one, can't wait to get started. But before we get underway, I just want to remind you that there will be a Q&A session following today's presentation. You participate in that by filling in the box at the bottom of the screen with your question. Our experts will address as many of those questions as possible before we sign off, but any that are still unanswered, still pending when we close, they will get to offline. Well, to help us get started today and to introduce the other experts you will hear from is Zoe Moring, WorkStep's Vice President of Marketing. WorkStep, of course, is an employee engagement solution that helps organizations engage and retain their frontline workforce. Prior to WorkStep, Zoe led marketing at a global HR tech company. Zoe, it's great to see you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Russell. Excited to be here and excited for the conversation today. As you mentioned, WorkStep is an end-to-end employee engagement solution for organizations with majority frontline workforce across the supply chain. At WorkStep, we believe that one of the most fundamental responsibilities a company has is to its employees. But of course, finding the balance between meeting workplace needs and helping the organization exceed business goals can be really challenging. So today I'm joined by experts Jon Cox from NFI and Grant Stevens from J.B. Hunt to help us understand how they're approaching this challenge. I'd like to pass it over to them now to introduce themselves. And Jon, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Zoe. I'll try to be worthy of the name expert here, but I'm Jon Cox. I'm the Vice President of Talent Development for NFI Industries. NFI is a family-owned 3PL end-to-end supply chain solutions company. We're located in New Jersey with about 16,000 plus employees. I'm actually located in one of our regional offices in Dallas, Texas. I've been with NFI for about a year and a half. I have a responsibility over our talent strategy. I lead the talent organizational development functions, traditional learning and development, talent management, employee engagement, performance management, succession planning, and pretty much anything else they ask me to do, right? So while I'm relatively new to NFI, I'm not necessarily new to the industry. I've spent most of my career, about 18 years or so, working in this industry or in manufacturing, which is very similar as well. So I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for having me, and I'll pass it over to Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Jon, and good morning, everyone. Good to be with you to discuss this very important topic. My name is Grant Stevens, and I work for J.B. Hunt. J.B. Hunt is a multimodal transportation solutions company that's been in business for a little over 60 years now. We're mostly a North American company employing about 35,000 employees. I lead things all talent here at J.B. Hunt. Much like Jon, it includes many of those functions, including anything that they ask me to do as well, Jon. The last 4 or 5 years, I have been very focused on employee listening and making sure that we connect what our employees are telling us and then try to translate that into success for them and thus success for the company and really hopefully the industry and providers, no matter our competition. Been with the company for a little while now, and again, encouraged and excited to talk about this topic today. Zoe, I guess you'll take it away for us.
I will. Thank you so much. Really excited to have both of you here today. Over the next 45 minutes or so, Jon, Grant, and I are going to cover a couple key learnings, including if and how frontline workforce expectations are shifting in this macro environment, how to balance operational needs against employee needs, how technology can be leveraged to help identify or address frontline concerns and needs, and ultimately, like how to measure the impact of workforce initiatives on those key business outcomes like productivity and profitability. I think the last few years have been marked by a lot of upheaval and change, I would say, from global disruptions to a pandemic to economic uncertainty and new generations entering the workforce. And I think we all recognize that across the global supply chain, leaders like yourselves are being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. And sometimes this can come at the expense of the frontline workforce. At the same time, I think we all know that an engaged workforce leads to better outcomes across all of the metrics that matter. And we're really trying to figure out how to achieve both. That's the goal of the discussion today. So with that, I'd really love to turn to our experts. And, before we look forward at solutions, I think it's really important to kind of ground today's conversation in the current moment and how it might be different from years past. So as really senior and experienced supply chain leaders, Grant, Jon, I'm really curious to understand or know what you're seeing. Like, how have frontline expectations shifted in recent years? Jon, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that when I think about how expectations have changed or shifted, I kind of bucket things into one of two categories in terms of retention versus attraction, right? So with the current employees with retention, I think there has been a change in some areas, but in other places it hasn't changed. And in other ways, I think what employees have always wanted, they just want that much more, right? I think employees have always wanted fair and competitive pay and benefits, right? They've always wanted an engaged manager that provides them feedback and development. They've always wanted career stability and mobility. I think with the younger generation, with changes post-COVID, employees, while they may have always needed those things, they were maybe more willing to stay put if they weren't having that satisfied as much. Whereas now I think they're really saying, how are you going to do this for us, right? And so that's one of our struggles. I think on the other side, I'll talk about the attraction side. How do we attract new employees who maybe haven't been a part of this industry? That's where I'm really seeing a lot of the change. And it was mentioned in the introduction, right? It's that flexibility component. I think that's one of the key challenges that we are faced with as an industry. Obviously, office workers is one thing, and even that's a challenge in itself. But it's that deskless worker, the worker in the warehouse, or the driver. How do we get creative and provide them flexibility? Because we are hearing loud and clear from the workforce that has yet to join us that that's what they want. So that's a big change over the past few years, and it's something that I think we're all struggling to come up with the right answers to.
Yeah, Grant.
Yeah, and Zoe, I was just going to jump in, Zoe, if you're going to give me the torch there, is that right?
Yes, please do.
Good. I tend to jump in right behind someone talking there. I echo everything that Jon said. I'm curious to see if there is going to be a material effect on just the available talent pool that we're all fishing in. And being honest, I don't believe that we've seen a big effect yet, but I think, again, due to the fact that, especially if you're thinking about professional drivers, technicians, warehouse workers, where you need to be present to execute the work, physically present to execute the work, there is an inherent lack of flexibility, especially if we're talking about remote or hybrid work, obviously, in those jobs. And it's already hard enough to attract those people to those jobs, and I think it could get harder down the line. That's why I think it's very important to try to highlight the other benefits and ways for folks to gain gratification and value from the hard work in these much essential jobs. I mean, these jobs and this work is so essential and important to our economy, to our country. So we've really been focused on trying to highlight those other attributes where flexibility may not be able to be altered as much as maybe some other types of jobs.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like part of what you're both saying is, you know, from a recruitment standpoint, there's a big challenge here in sort of pulling people into this industry. And one way is potentially highlighting, here are all the other things outside of flexibility that you might gain. I'm curious if there are other strategies the two of you have been focused on, either like by recruiting different talent pools or thinking creatively about how you're kind of bringing folks, designing programs to recruit people in that maybe haven't been in this industry before.
Yeah, I'll jump in there, but I first want to say I agree with everything around, it's an inherently not as flexible role, but I do think it's incumbent on us as leaders to think differently about what it might mean to be flexible, right? And so that may come down to thinking differently about our shifts. How can we, is it a 4-10? Is it working 7 on, 5 off? Different attendance policies, different hiring practices to get more employees so we can be flexible. So I do think there's different ways to be flexible beyond just that hybrid work model. And that's what we have to kind of tackle and address. But in terms of your question, Zoe, about programs to maybe attract a different audience, I know our company is focused on kind of looking into different talent pools, like you said, right? And so there's a few different ones. We have a partnership with a veterans organization. That's a really great pool of talent that is leaving the military, some after 5 to 10 years and some after a 20-25 year service. And so they are willing to relocate and ready to take on these types of roles and go into an operational type role. We've had great success with that. We're exploring some different other organizations that work with people with disabilities and how we can work with them to bring them into the organization. So there's certainly what I would call untapped or undertapped talent pools out there that we're thinking creatively about how to staff our organization.
Yeah, Jon, I appreciate the comment around thinking creatively about flexibility. Agree. I think we've learned that flexibility is different depending upon who you're talking to, and certainly I think you have to ask the questions and not just assume what that means for people. So appreciate the comment there. Doing some of the same things you all are doing, Jon, as well, as far as trying to source and attract talent differently. One thing I would add on that relates to some of the things that you said was we're also looking at trying to build apprenticeship programs, kind of going a little earlier in the lives of people. Think high school, in that time frame where we're really trying to highlight the importance of all these skilled trade labor jobs that exist out there in the marketplace, obviously including the jobs that we have at our companies. And we've had some great success so far. We're piloting some programs in some certain metro markets where we're able to give high school students some exposure to what we do. In some cases, we're busting some myths and showing that it's cool, that it's something that they can do and thrive at. And I see that growing in the future as we kind of move down the line.
It's interesting you say busting some myths. I to some extent, I still think the supply chain industry can be a little bit of a just, what is that? What does that even mean? Does a high schooler or even some college student even understand what all is involved with working in the supply chain industries and the various different career paths one can take from an entry-level position to others? So I like the way you say that. That's great.
Yeah, that's fascinating stuff. And I think just the creative way you all are thinking about sort of pulling people into this industry is really helpful. I want to focus in a little bit more on the flexibility piece that you talked about, as well as some of the initiatives for your existing workforce. Because, we know that even though the needs of workers might be changing, or the fact that they might be more willing to leave now if they're not getting those demands met, that doesn't at the end of the day change your sort of business needs or shareholder obligations. So I'm curious, Jon, Grant, as leaders of all things talent and talent management, how do you sort of navigate the line between making sure that your organization can meet those production distribution goals and also meet the demands of your employees? What types of programs are you investing in across the organization to really retain and engage that frontline workforce? Grant, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think really our emphasis, especially since the pandemic, not that we didn't already do it, but we really felt like because of all the dynamics and the changes that we've mentioned, we really needed to listen differently. So we have been listening more broadly, more deeply, and systematically in the last couple of years. And I think we can kind of get into how technology helps us with that later. But just extending more olive branches has seemingly helped, even if we can't meet all employee demands. I think there's just something there from employees if they can feel, at least I'm being listened to. That said, through our increased listening efforts, we've been able to get to problems more quickly and also individualize and support more easily. We have increased some time off benefits over the last couple of years, and we've implemented some mental health support that definitely aids some effects from the demanding work that's present in our industry. Jon mentioned scheduling earlier. Work scheduling is key in our opinion, and the key to a great schedule is great proactive communication and partnership between our leaders and our employees. We do our best to work with our employees on what life events they have coming up and do our best to schedule such that they can be present for those important moments. When feasible, we've implemented flex staff models where employees can float to cover shifts and assignments. And just kind of rounding all this up here, we have years of evidence that when you have great leaders and a great team, people generally enjoy the workplace, even if that's on the road mostly. So we continue to invest and alter where needed in leadership development and hiring practices to ensure we get a great team that people want to be around and communicate with often. I might mention lastly, just something just came to mind. We've increased and altered the way that we communicate with our frontline workers. In addition to communication hitting their mobile devices, we have kiosks and TVs at different work locations where employees can engage or find useful resources. We've also invested in a new recognition program in the last year that allows our frontline workers, again, mostly those drivers, technicians type workers, to receive and give recognition on a daily basis instead of relying on traditional periods for awards like quarterly or annual awards. So all these things, again, they may not directly respond to an employee wanting more flexibility, as we've mentioned, but our hope is that these things will outweigh the lack of flexibility where we can't make adjustments as compared to some white collar jobs.
Yeah, Grant, it's what you're talking about. I agree with everything you said. We're doing a lot of similar things. We're painting a fuller picture, right? It's not just do you have flexibility or do you not, right? It's here's the value proposition for working for our organization. And some of that is efforts that we're taking to be flexible for the deskless worker. Others are things like what you mentioned, right? We're doing some similar things. I wholeheartedly agree that a comprehensive, what I call an employee feedback strategy or listening strategy is critical. If you don't know how your employees feel about working for you, then how can you address issues and how can you make it a positive employee experience, right? I know we're going to get into that later. Some of the things that I would call out that are, I think, are unique, and I'm proud of what we're doing at NFI. Leadership development, you mentioned it too, Grant. It's really key, providing that leadership development to the front line. That is the individual that really impacts the broadest majority of our employees, right? How do you do that without disrupting work, right? We can't just pull all of our frontline supervisors, bring them to New Jersey. We're located all across North America, bring them into New Jersey and disrupt work for a week as they travel and do that. And so one of the things that we did is we created what we call regional training centers of excellence. And the goal was, we have several of them. Some of them are permanent, some of them are pop-up, depending on populations. But we did that with a goal of 90% of our workforce or our leaders able to get to training via car. They don't have to jump on a plane. They don't have to get in a hotel room. They can get to training via a car. It might be a longer trip for some than others, but it's still a car trip, right? So we're a year into that program of providing every single frontline leader leadership development training. We're seeing good dividends from that. Something else I mentioned is just general culture work, right? How do we invest in our culture? I think that NFI has a really strong culture. It's one of the strongest things about our organization. I do think culture often happens organically, but if you don't take care of it intentionally, it can begin to slip, right? So doubling down on our core values, investing in diversity and inclusion work with employee resource groups for the field and education, cultural celebrations, things that we're doing that sometimes you don't always see that as like, oh, that's an investment in retention. Well, we're investing in building a positive culture intentionally, and that, and kind of down the line, helps to retain our employees.
Yeah, I love that you both mentioned sort of efforts to recognize your employees in these kind of smaller ways, right? Like understanding the personal events that are coming up to ensure that scheduling will allow for them to be there. Or as you just said, Jon, sort of like investing in that culture and experience so that folks feel really positive about the team around them. So I really love that idea and that focus on the employee. I'm curious, in those types of programs, or maybe just broadly, what is your relationship like with your operations counterparts, and how do you work with folks on the ops side, all the way down to frontline leaders, to sort of make sure that these programs get to your frontline workforce and are successful?
Yeah, I'll take that first. It's kind of a combination of just organic, constant communication from leaders to their employees and employees to their leaders. And certainly, I think through our teams in HR, just being close to those leaders, you're gonna feel that and hear what they're getting from that. So that's kind of the organic part. I think the more formal, systematic part is we like to first of all, our HR team sees data that's collected from these listening efforts, and we then translate or create programs and initiatives from that information. So we co-create those programs and initiatives with operations leaders. I think one of the worst mistakes that I've certainly made in my career is you go create a program and think that it's the best thing in the world, but you're doing it kind of in a silo, and you're not doing it with your operations leaders or the employees that you're affecting. I think there's a limited opportunity for success if you do it that way. So it certainly takes a village, if you will, and I think that's the best approach, is to be close to the people that these programs and initiatives impact. Let them co-create with you, and then from there, I think a lot of times groups where you've got representatives from those different stakeholder groups coming together, saying, okay, this is what the program or initiative should be. Let's get it in place. Let's pilot it. Let's maybe fail fast and make adjustments, and then create a better sustainable program. And then from there, I think you need a group of stakeholder leaders, again, in this example, it'd be operations leaders, maybe even the frontline employees and the team that's supporting it, in this case, probably HR, getting together in a periodic manner. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's biannually, to say, okay, hey, this has been moving. How do we feel? Here's the data, here's the KPIs that we felt like we needed to use to understand the success, whether or not this has been successful or not. Do we need to make any adjustments? Is it not working anymore? Is it not relevant anymore? I think all these could be applied to many things that we work on, but certainly that's how we've done it.
Yeah, you talk about kind of that not wanting to come across as we're pushing a program onto you, right? But that co-creation, we work on it together. I'll say at no point in my career have I ever been in a place where there's such a positive partnership between operations and the broader HR organization as there is at NFI. It's really positive here. And I think, that predates me. I think that comes from demonstrated success, right? You talked about failing fast. I think that so often as a shared service function, an issue is out there and we just want to do all the analysis. We want to do the best practices, and we want to make sure that we find what's the absolute best way to solve this. And sometimes we what's the phrase, like we let perfect get in the way of progress, right? And in the operations world, you can't do that, right? And so I think shared services, HR, talent, we've got to match that pace of operations. And when there's an issue, we've got to be able to address it. We have to iterate on solutions. We can't necessarily just, lock ourselves in a dark closet and come out with a perfect solution. We got to get going now. And I think our organization has done a good job with that. And you talked about kind of ongoing meetings. We're a large organization. We're all across North America, as is JB Hunt. With our listening strategy, our employee feedback strategy, we have a built-in cadence where operation leaders are coming together with HR partners, with leaders from the talent team. They're looking at that data that we're getting from the feedback mechanism. They're strategizing and action planning together. In some places it's quarterly, and some it's monthly, right? It's based on the maturity and the need and the want. So we have that built-in regular cadence. I found that to be really effective because you just know it's coming, right? And the great thing about that is we're not spending our time looking at the data for the first time. It's now to a point where the operations leaders have gotten into the data and they're already looking at it daily. And so we're coming together to strategize on what to do about it. And we didn't get there overnight. We started off having to, okay, now here's how you access this data. Here's what this means. And as we've matured, those meetings have matured. They've been really incredibly powerful for making an impact to our employee population.
Yeah, Zoe, if you don't mind, I'd like to tack on right there. I think bringing those leaders together on a periodic basis is really important, not just to do what you said, but also so they can look across the organization and not just at their downline. I think that's really important. We learn from each other when we're trying to make it better for all of our employees. And hopefully we don't all pretend that we have all the best ideas, and that you can learn from your teammates. And certainly we've gotten a lot of great value from leaders from different parts of the United States or different operations groups, talking to each other, saying, okay, you have the same problem I do, or you have the same opportunity that I do. What are you doing about it? Is there something that you're doing over here that maybe I could also apply to my group? So that's been great to see. We've not always done that up until, I guess, the last 2 or 3 years. And I think that's created more speed of success. And also, you talked about culture work, Jon. It's also kind of strengthened the consistency of our culture as well, because we have leaders talking across the company saying, okay, we can do some of the same things to go solve these problems or make things better.
I've jokingly said before, half my job is just getting the right people in a room together. Maybe it's a virtual room now, but it's getting the right people in a room together to solve them together. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that idea of being able to almost like up level that leadership too, that frontline layer, by allowing them to share with one another what they're seeing and how they're thinking creatively about solutions. I really love that idea of sort of it not only creates better culture and more communication, but it also just helps up level those leaders in their roles as well. I'm curious, since you both have mentioned listening and the importance of listening to your frontline workforce, I'm wondering if you can each maybe share in greater detail how exactly you're doing that, how you're using listening to really address the needs of your frontline workforce. Jon, maybe we can start with you on this one.
Yeah, so spoiler alert, WorkStep is our partner that we work with. WorkStep's a fantastic, and to call it a survey tool is probably underselling it, right? It's a, like you said, an end-to-end employee engagement tool. What we really like about WorkStep is you can kind of customize the frequency, but it's ongoing. It can be a one-time survey, an annual survey, but it's ongoing. We do it, upon hire, day 7, 14, 30, 60, 90, and then every 90 days going forward. And we might adjust that timing, but regardless of the timing, it's an ongoing survey tool so that you always have kind of a point in time look into employee sentiment. And we empower leaders. We decide which levels, but the leaders throughout the organization, general managers in our warehouses and terminal managers, they're able to get in there at any given point and see right now, what are my employees saying? How are they feeling? It's been a really great tool to capture overall sentiment, just kind of general how things are going, but then also to drill down on specific topics or to drill down in specific areas and see how things are going. And then, like I said, having the data is one thing, but action planning and doing something with it is really the critical piece. And that's where that cadence that I was talking about, where we come together regularly to review the data and action plan off of it. It's been a really powerful tool.
Yeah, the model that you described, Jon, is also the way that we apply WorkStep as well. So we use WorkStep, and I think it's really been interesting. The continuous listening is something that I think can sometimes feel daunting to maybe employees at times, maybe the leaders of those employees. Like, I'm constantly looking at this, I'm constantly trying to do something, action plan. And I think we've partnering with WorkStep, we figured out a way that it just feels natural. We already had kind of an onboarding program where we gained feedback from employees, but using WorkStep and kind of augmenting that program has really just made a lot better. We've gotten more information, and one of the ways that our leaders really appreciate using the tool is if we get comments back from the employees and they want to give us direct feedback, there's a way to respond to that direct feedback in an anonymous manner, meaning the manager or the leader does not see who it is that's actually making the comment, but they're saying, hey, look, we hear you. We'd like to address this. And in some cases, maybe it's a very individual matter. And at that point, maybe we ask permission to say, hey, if you would like to talk about this one-on-one or in an office somewhere, then here's my information. I'd love to talk to you about that. So I think just making it safe, I think, for the employee to give the feedback, A. B, then saying, hey, if you really want to work on this individually, we may not be able to do this anonymously the whole time, but here's an invitation to do it if you're comfortable doing it. I think that's been really cool, and something that I think has been a game changer. I think some other listening platforms out there, they kind of disagree with that practice, again, because they think it might break the trust of the employees. But at least with our frontline workers, it's not done that at all. Our employees have been very welcoming to say, hey, look, yes, absolutely, I will get in a room with you and talk through this issue. In fact, here's my name and here's my number to do that. I've thought that's really interesting. So just to add on, again, same model. And I should add, talking with Dan with WorkStep, I thought he gave a great analogy. You've got this continuous listening cadence. And again, the same cadence that you mentioned, the 7, the 14, the 30, the 90, and then in the 9 days after that. We are also implementing an annual survey. We're actually preparing that right now. We're going to implement that in December. It'll be the first time we do it on the WorkStep platform, and talking to Dan about just kind of how, whether or not we should do that or not do that. He gave us an analogy of, well, when you're in the continuous listening, it's almost kind of like if you have like a watch that tracks your health, whether that's Fitbit or the health app on your Apple Watch. It kind of gives you an understanding of, at some level, how healthy you are. Like, what's your heart rate? How many steps are you taking? That's almost kind of what we're getting with the continuous listening that's just always on the whole time. The annual engagement survey can kind of serve as maybe that once annual check at the doctor. Your health check at the doctor, so, where you might ask maybe more comprehensive questions to supplement this information that you've been getting on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So we like that analogy. We're going to try and see how it works, and we're hopeful that that cadence will kind of continue going forward.
I hope the employees don't dread the annual survey as much as I dread my annual doctor's checkup. But
Yeah.
One thing I'll add in terms of the overall listening strategy and feedback strategy, there's another side or another component to this, and that's how are we communicating back to the employees? Kind of a broad statement. I say this all the time. Like, WorkStep's a fantastic tool. There's a lot of different ways to communicate to employees, receive feedback from employees, and we want to leverage all those. But we also work in an environment where we are in person. So I always say, don't let a good tool replace a great conversation. And at the end of the day, you can't let this replace the value of our leaders being present and available and talking with their employees and hearing from and creating a culture where they can give them the feedback face to face and directly. We absolutely want this other avenue as well. We find it to be most powerful when you have both, when you have the avenue to provide it. So we have data on it, and we have an open environment where leaders are getting that feedback directly. And that ties into our leadership development training and equipping leaders to be able to create that type of culture and environment.
Agree 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about, based on what you both are saying, like, this isn't a sort of like one size fits all. There's one thing you need to do and everything else falls into place. It's all of these different pieces coming together so that you can really create a better experience for your frontline workforce. And then at the same time, know that if that frontline workforce is feeling good and feeling safe and feeling happy and motivated with the work that you're doing, that's going to translate into the results you see on the other side. Just being mindful of time here. I know we have a few audience questions to get into. So Russell, if it's okay with you, I'd love to bring you back into the conversation so we can move into more audience Q&A.
Well, thank you, Zoe, and thank you to Jon and Grant as well, because that was a terrific drill down, I got to say. But as Zoe says, we want to bring the audience into what we're talking about here right now. Both Jon and Grant, as they just said, are here. They are available. This is a learning experience for all of us. They are going to learn what's on your mind through the questions that you are posing, and you're going to learn about what it is they have to say. Just a reminder, though the questions are coming in, if you have not submitted a question, please feel free to do so. This is your invitation to do so. Jon and Grant will get to each of them either in the presentation today or offline. All right. Among the questions that have come in right now, and Jon, let me just start with you. This is a practical question. Somebody says, do you have any examples of how to create a better partnership between talent leaders and ops leaders? And then they follow up by saying, well, what has been actually helpful for you in creating a stronger relationship between those two functions? So what would you say? How do you answer that?
Good question. I think, Grant touched on it a little bit earlier. So I'll talk about an approach and then kind of say what's worked for me. I'm a big believer in what I call the consultative approach. And Peter Block is kind of the expert author on that. He wrote a whole book on it, but he talks about there's really three ways you can address being consultative with in this case, an operational leader. And I think a lot of times, one of those ways is being the expert, coming in, being the expert, swooping in, saying, here's what we're going to do, drop the solution on the leader and then get out. That rarely works, right? There may be a time and a place to be the expert, but that's usually not the best approach. I think the opposite end of that spectrum is what Peter Block calls the pair of hands, where the operational leader says, hey, I need XYZ, and we come in and we just say, yes, sir, and we go do it, right? Sometimes that gets you some inroads, and sometimes that's necessary to kind of build that relationship. But at the end of the day, you're not providing your expertise, you're just doing what they asked. And so, really, I prefer that collaborative approach, coming in and being in the business, solutioning together, understanding the need together and coming up with what's the best solution together. So that's kind of a broad example, but what's worked best for me is two things. Build relationships, right? Get out there, be in their locations, be face-to-face with the leader when possible, get to know them as a human being, and truly demonstrate to them that I'm not just here to tell you what HR says we need to do. I'm here to hear what is your world like? And now let me go back to the drawing table and see what we can do to help you with that. So being there, present, being having a relationship with them, and then leveraging, I can't be everywhere at once, right? So leveraging my team, leveraging our HR operations partners who are there every day, and really having a close partnership with them. So then we can be strategic about where we go and build those relationships.
You really did talk, both of you did speak about the importance of culture, understanding it and being sensitive to it. And I believe that's what you just expressed. Grant, do you have any views on the attendees' question?
Yeah, I've never been turned down when I've gone and asked really any leader of any function of work inside this company, when I just asked them, hey, can I learn more about what you do so that I can support you better?
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that I did when I joined JB Hunt 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, is I got in a truck with a driver and I rode along with them. And I got to live that world for a day. And then I got to talk about it. And it was almost immediate respect and credibility as I talked to the operations leaders that managed that driver, that I could just say, hey, look, this is what I experienced. This is what I saw. So much respect for the job that they do. So it's just emphasizing what Jon said. Just getting in there and trying to understand the world that you support, I think, is really the lesson there. The other thing I would say broadly, once you've built that relationship and once you've gained that respect and credibility to be part of the team, aligning on just what your overall philosophy on how to lead and develop and retain people is extremely important. If there's misalignment, either between me as an HR leader and our CEO, or amongst the executive leadership team, it's going to make things harder for all of us to do everything that we want to do, making the lives better for our employees. So driving that alignment, I think, is part of our responsibility, and you get there through relationships and credibility.
The importance of walking in somebody else's shoes cannot be overemphasized, cannot be overstated. Here is another practical question that has come in from the audience. Each of you can take a shot at this because it's actually directed to both of you. What KPIs do each one of you look at on a day-to-day basis? Well, let us in on that. What are they? Grant, stick with you. Let's stick with you. What would you say?
Yeah, I think the one that might be most obvious is retention. And I also think it could be one of the trickiest because there's so many factors that factor into retaining employees. But I think if you're not looking at some type of relationship or correlation to retention, then I think you're probably missing it. So just to break that down a little bit, as we get feedback from our employees and the surveys that we send and then collect information from them on, we try to correlate, okay, does this theme relate to their likelihood to stay or leave at the company, whether that's pay, whether that's manager relationship, whatever. We try to do our best to try to draw a relationship there, because ultimately retention is one of the main things that we're after when it comes to listening to our employees. Other operational KPIs also come into play. And I would tell you that we're early in the journey of building a strong relationship and set of metrics here around safety. Safety is one that I think in our industry is paramount. And also good safety results has a domino effect on other outcomes and KPIs that we care a whole lot about. And then ultimately productivity as well, which productivity is somewhat like retention. A lot of environmental factors there. So we're trying to like weed through the noise a little bit to say, okay, can we account for this environmental factor? Can we account for that environmental factor and look at what our employees are telling us? And does that lead to more productivity? Those are a few.
Jon?
Yeah, I mean, so the same KPIs in terms of retention and safety are important to us as well, and certainly critical. One thing I'll add is, there's a measure that's called favorability via WorkStep, and it's just kind of you can have an overall favorability, which is kind of the culmination of all the different themes and scores from that data, or you can really drill down by specific themes. And what I look at regularly is we've coined the term dropping a pin. If an event happens, if you do something that is intended to try to help, or maybe something negative has happened, you can literally mark it in the WorkStep tool, and then you can see how employee favorability has been impacted since that marking, what we call dropping a pin. And that is something I look at regularly to be able to drill down in specific areas and to really know, okay, is what we're doing working, or is this event having an adverse effect on our population? I do that along with the other ones that Grant mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Here's a situation. We've been talking about your relationship with folks you're working with or who are working under you, but the audience member wants to know what your relationship is in a sense with those that you report to. What kind of information are you sending them? What are the kinds of reports that they want to see? So that's a good question. What are you telling the senior management types?
Yeah, I'll take that. Similar to what Jon described earlier, we have a regular cadence of, for lack of better phrases, reporting meetings that we have with our senior leadership teams. We have about 30 senior vice presidents, and about 2/3 of those senior vice presidents oversee the groups that we're listening to. So we bring that group together on a quarterly basis. And like Jon said, sometimes those leaders want to meet more frequently than that, and certainly we accommodate that. But the whole group is put together on a quarterly basis, and we actually go through just a comprehensive summary packet of results. We also pull up the dashboard that we have within WorkStep and review some summarial views at their level on, again, what is the sentiment? What has changed since last quarter? What outcomes have we seen? Dropping the pin, we do that as well, Jon. So what have we seen since we dropped the pin? Has that made a difference? So again, on a quarterly basis, they're going to get that information. Again, we also do an annual survey. So there's a big effort around our annual survey results and then action planning from that. And we actually check progress on action plans on about a quarterly basis as well.
Yeah, I won't duplicate too much of what Grant said, but we're similar. This is a common theme for me, right? It's, again, don't let a report replace a conversation. I think what's really critical is storytelling, and having that avenue, having that cadence, whatever it is, having that partnership with the senior management team, the people we report to and above us, to be able to, yes, give the data, look at the report, but have the opportunity to talk about it and say, here's what's behind the numbers, or here's the sentiment, and here's this employee feedback that we're getting and testimonial and how that drives, that sentiment. having that avenue is what's really important for us. And so we have our cadences and our quarterly meetings, things like that as well. But whatever the cadence, whatever the report, having that relationship and the ability to discuss what's behind the numbers really is what's been effective for us to drive results.
Russell,
Great.
if I may,
Yeah.
Russell, I just want to tack on to that really quickly. Can't emphasize that enough, but it made me think about some advanced analysis that we've been doing the last year or so, where we've looked at certain segments of our population. If you're looking at a big set of data, I think sometimes you could get head faked a little bit as to what you are seeing and maybe what you're believing is going on out there. But then if you dig more into the data, you may see that it's only a certain type of worker or demographic set that's all available with the information that we have with our I'll just call it personnel system and WorkStep together. They integrate, so you can get that information together and say, you know what, actually what we thought, that doesn't apply to the bigger audience. That applies to this section of the workforce, and leader over here at the corner of the table. That's something that we can work with you on. Let's get deeper into that insight and go talk to those employees, maybe do some focus groups and understand, confirm what we're going after, and then go to action.
100% agree. Yep.
Gentlemen, time is running short, but there are two questions that of a practical nature that I think we really do want to try to get to, but as briefly as we can. First question, in your operations, the best process tool that you've implemented that had the most value or biggest bang to the ops teams, outside of pay, of course. So how would you answer that question?
I'll go quickly. Obviously, WorkStep has been tremendous and huge for us. And then the process that I mentioned earlier of bringing in leadership development training to the leaders in their area, that process has been huge, and it's continuing on, and will continue to be big for us.
All right. Let me just go to this one other question here. Any tips that you might have to make improvements when resources are limited, there is a hiring freeze, and high turnover? That's a great question. What would you say, Grant?
That's a loaded question.
You take that one, Grant.
There's a lot to that one right there.
Yeah.
Well, I can probably only answer that simply by saying, go to the people and talk with them and listen to them and show them that you're listening and be humane about it. Some of those things that I just heard there are things that I think at some level we have to accept, right? I think that there are conditions in our industry that are going to lead to some high turnover in spots. We're going to have limited resources in spots. And I think Jon has made the point several times very well. Don't just rely on, the electronic tools or things that we can access in our office, but actually getting to the employee face to face, or the number of employees that we're hearing from face to face, and listening to them and showing them that you care and doing your best to try to affect whatever they're asking for, assuming it's reasonable, right? I think is really the foundational item there. There may be some other detail in that question where we could get into some cases, but that's how I'd have to answer broadly.
All right, very good, very good. Zoe, I'm going to go to you. We have absolutely left the folks today with a tremendous amount of information, an avalanche, if you will. Great detail, but final question goes to you. The one thing that you want to stand out, that you want to leave with them, and the question is this: how can supply chain leaders meet the workforce expectations of today and at the same time deliver increased productivity, to meet those increased productivity goals? What do you say? What do you tell them?
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I think as both Jon and Grant have said, this is a tough one, and there's no silver bullet here. But I think, we've heard today that meeting those workforce expectations and delivering those really exceptional business results is really hard. It's a tall order. But I think we've also learned today from Jon and from Grant that in a dynamic supply chain environment, the people on the front line are really key to your success. You invest in your people, you will see increased productivity per employee. You will see a lower safety incidence rate, higher customer satisfaction, and a better bottom line. I mean, imagine a world where by engaging with your frontline employees, you can proactively identify those issues before they become really critical work stoppages or supply chain disruptions. Imagine a world where you can automatically deploy solutions to these problems or point your folks in the right direction to have the right conversations with the right people at the right time, and use data to adapt your strategies in real time to meet those shifting expectations of a really diverse and distributed workforce. I mean, the good news is that this world does sort of exist now. You've heard from NFI and JB Hunt. You've heard them share how they're capturing continuous feedback from their frontline. They're investing a lot of time and resources into their employees' mental and physical well-being, and they're tying those initiatives and employee pain points to key business metrics and the stories that really bring those data points to life. So at the end of the day, prioritizing the voice of your frontline is one of the most essential and effective ways that you can create a safer, a more engaged, and ultimately a more productive workforce.
Absolutely great information right there. Well, speaking of engagement, right now, folks, I want you to look at your screen very carefully. WorkStep wants to continue to have a relationship with you. If you've got a question, drop a line to the information that you see on the screen, to the email there, or you can visit the website of WorkStep to get more information on just what WorkStep offers you. And also in line with keeping engaged with you, take a look at the resources that will be coming your way. Great information right there. All right. I want to thank Zoe Morin of WorkStep, Jon Cox of NFI, and Grant Stevens of JB Hunt for this enlightening discussion today. Thanks to every one of you. And a big thanks to each one of you who is attending today's presentation. All right. This wraps it up for today. But until next time, this is Russell Goodman, Supply Chain Brain, saying so long.